Phase the Fourth. The Consequence. Chapter 25. Claire, restless, went out into the dusk when evening drew on, she who had won him having retired to her chamber. The night was as sultry as the day. There was no coolness after dark unless on the grass. Roads, garden paths, the house fronts, the barton walls were warm as hearths, and reflected the noontide temperature into the noctambulist's face. He sat in the east gate of the dairy yard, and knew not what to think of himself. Feeling had indeed smothered judgment that day. Since the sudden embrace 3 hours before, the twain had kept apart. She seemed stilled, almost alarmed at what had occurred, while the novelty, unpremeditation, mastery of circumstance disquieted him. Palpitating, contemplated being that he was, he could hardly realize their true relations to each other as yet, and what their mutual bearing should be before third parties henceforward. Angel had come as pupil to this dairy in the idea that his temporary residence here was to be the merest episode in his life, soon passed through and easily forgotten. He had come as to a place from which, as to a screened alcove, he could calmly view the absorbing world without, and apostrophizing it with Walt Whitman, "Crowds of men and women, attired in the usual costumes, how curious you are to me," resolve upon a plan for plunging into that world anew. But behold, the absorbing scene had been imported hither. What had been the engrossing world had dissolved into an uninteresting outer dumb show, while here, in this apparently dim and impassioned place, novelty had volcanically started up, as it had never for him started up elsewhere. Every window of the house being open, Claire could hear across the yard each trivial sound of the retiring household. That dairy house, so humble, so insignificant, so purely to him a place of constrained sojourn, that he had never hitherto deemed it of sufficient importance to be reconnoitred as an object of any quality whatever in the landscape. What was it now? The aged and lichened brick gables breathed forth "Stay." The windows smiled, the door coaxed and beckoned, the creeper blushed confederacy. A personality within it was so far-reaching in her influence as to spread into and make the bricks, mortar, and whole overhanging sky throb with a burning sensibility. Whose was this mighty personality? A milkmaid's. It was amazing indeed to find how great a matter the life of the obscure dairy had become to him, and though new love was to be held partly responsible for this, it was not solely so. Many besides Angel have learned that the magnitude of lives is not as to their external displacements, but as to their subjective experiences. The impressionable peasant leaves a larger, fuller, more dramatic life than the pachydermatous king. Looking at it thus, he found that life was to be seen of the same magnitude here as elsewhere. Despite his heterodoxy, faults and weaknesses, Claire was a man of conscience. Tess was no insignificant creature to toy with and dismiss, but a woman living her precious life, a life which, to herself who endured or enjoyed it, possessed as great a dimension as the life of the mightiest to himself. Upon her sensations the whole world depended to Tess. Through her existence all her fellow creatures existed to her. The universe itself only came into being for Tess on the particular day in the particular year in which she was born. This consciousness upon which he had intruded was the single opportunity of existence ever vouchsafed to Tess by an unsympathetic first cause, her all, her every and only chance. How then should he look upon her as of less consequence than himself, as a pretty trifle to caress and grow weary of, and not deal in the great seriousness with the affection which he knew that he had awakened in her, so fervid and so impressionable, as she was under her reserve, in order that it might not agonize and wreck her. To encounter her daily in the accustomed manner would be to develop what had begun. Living in such close relations, to meet meant to fall into endearment. Flesh and blood could not resist it. And having arrived at no conclusion as to the issue of such a tendency, he decided to hold aloof, for the present, from occupations in which they would be mutually engaged. As yet the harm done was small. But it was not easy to carry out the resolution never to approach her. He was driven towards her by every heave of his pulse. He thought he would go and see his friends. It might be possible to sound them upon this. In less than 5 months his term here would have ended, and after a few additional months spent upon other farms he would be fully equipped in agricultural knowledge, and in a position to start on his own account. Would not a farmer want a wife? And should a farmer's wife be a drawing-room wax figure, or a woman who understood farming? Notwithstanding the pleasing answer returned to him by the silence, he resolved to go his journey. One morning, when they sat down at breakfast at Talbothays dairy, some maid observed that she had not seen anything of Mr. Clare that day. "Oh no," said Dairyman Crick, "Mr. Clare has gone home to Emminster to spend a few days with his kinfolk." For 4 impassioned ones around that table the sunshine of the morning went out at a stroke, and the birds muffled their song. But neither girl by word or gesture revealed her blankness. "He's getting on towards the end of his time wi' me," added the dairyman, with a phlegm which unconsciously was brutal. "And so I suppose he is beginning to see about his plans elsewhere." "How much longer is he to bide here?" asked Izz Hewitt, the only one of the gloom-stricken bevy who could trust her voice with the question. The others waited for the dairyman's answer as if their lives hung upon it. Retty, with parted lips, gazing on the tablecloth; Marian, with heat added to her redness; Tess, throbbing, and looking out at the meads;